Hello everybody, and welcome to t-tests in SPSS. So the first thing we're going to do is just open up our data set that we've been using and do it just like we did before. Check your data, make sure it looks all good, just as before. Before we get to the t-test itself, I'm going to show you one technique to do something that's kind of like a t-test, or does get you some of the same information. So what I'm first going to show you how to do is get your information, your output, your statistics by group, meaning be able to see, let's say, males and females, get output for them separately. Right now, we've got means and standard deviations, frequencies. We've done that just kind of all together. So here's another way to see how to do that differently. So you go to the Data tab and go down to Split File. And once you do that, up will pop a box. It gives you a couple options. You can either compare groups that will allow you to do some analysis and then have the output just kind of right there next to each other with your groups so you can compare them directly. Organize output by groups will almost give you two different outputs. And I'll show you them instead of just trying to explain them, perhaps not the most effectively. So let's say we want to compare the output for males and females. Well, select compare groups and put gender into the group based on, and then hit OK. Once you've done that, the information will pop up in your statistics viewer. And now we can run whatever analyses we want. So let's do descriptive statistics, as we've done previously. And let's just do happiness, let's say. So we want to see how happy males and females are. Well, when you run that, you'll get a table that's very similar to the one we got previously in descriptive statistics, but in this case, it'll have males and female information separately. We can see females' average happiness is 4.14, whereas males, it's 3.88. So, by appearances here, it seems like females might be happier than males, but maybe not. That's a relatively small difference. We're rounding 4.1, 3.9, not that different. Now, the alternative option here is to do data split file and organize output by groups. Hit OK, and then we're going to run the same descriptive statistics that we just did. Again, hit OK. And here you get two separate tables. Information is the same, means, standard deviations, exact same as the information up there. So it's really just kind of stylistic, or depends on what you are precisely looking for. All right, so now let's get to t-tests. But first, we have to turn off the split. So we go back to split file, and you can hit reset, you can hit analyze all cases, do not create groups. It doesn't matter, either of those would be fine, as long as you see in your output split file is off. So let's talk t-tests for a minute. Now, depending on where you are in the semester, you might not have got to the t-test lecture, and that's okay. We're just going to kind of do the basics of t-tests now, because at its heart, t-tests aren't that complicated. So really, what t-tests do are compare group means. Now, what that does for us, in the case that we are primarily going to be looking at it for, is to be able to compare the group mean for females and males on, let's say, happiness. So the mean of happiness compared between males and females. Well, in that case, the t-test we'd be doing is called an independent samples t-test. And it's the one we're going to be going over by hand as well. It's the one that I see most often in my work, and conceptually I think is the most common one. So we will go up to analyze and then compare means, because that's what we're doing, and independent samples t-test. You can see that we have 4 different types of t-tests in here. We're sticking with independent samples t-test. And when you do this, you see that we have a test variables box and we have a grouping variable box. Grouping variables, just like before, those are nominal variables. So if we want to compare means of two groups, well, we need groups to compare. Now, t-tests only compare the means of two groups, not 3 or 4 or any other number of groups. If there are more than two groups and you want to compare their means, you might look to an ANOVA, but that's down the line a bit. For independent samples t-tests, we have two groups. So in that case, we could look at males and females, we could look at conservatives and liberals, we could look at freshmen and seniors. For the case here, we looked at males and females and happiness, so let's just do that here. So you will select your grouping variable and put it in your grouping variable box, and then select your testing variable, in this case happiness, and put it in your test variable. Now you'll see you can't hit OK yet. You can't actually run this as is. That's because we have to get to this Define Groups tab. Now the reason for this is, let's say instead of males and females, just in theory, we wanted to look at freshmen, sophomores, juniors, seniors, but we only really wanted to compare freshmen and seniors. Well, SPSS isn't smart enough to know which groups we want to compare. There's a lot of groups there you can compare. So you actually have to tell SPSS which groups you want it to by the value that those groups are. So in the case of gender, females are 0 and males are 1. So when we put gender here, we will have to hit Define Groups and put the specified values in here. So the first group is 0, the second group is 1. And honestly, it doesn't matter if you put 1 and 0. It doesn't matter at all. Then if you hit Continue, you can then hit OK, and up will come your t-table, the t-test table with all the information we need. Now you're going to get two different tables. The first one, just group statistics. These group statistics shockingly look a lot like these ones, right? The ones that we ran earlier. So if you're running a t-test, honestly, you don't need to do what we had previously done. But for the purposes of the statistics here, to see the real meat of it, just as you would be doing by hand, we've got to look at the independent samples t-test table. Now there's a couple things here that are going to take a little bit of time. You might want to watch this a couple times for the explanation. Now, when you run a t-test, you will get a t-statistic. Makes sense. That t-statistic is is indicated in this table, in this column. You do not have to worry about Levine's test. If you take inferential statistics, we'll talk about that. But for now, you don't have to worry about it. You need to worry about your t-test, and we're doing it for equal variances assumed. So it's this t-value. You also want to know your degrees of freedom. That's what DF is. And it's for the top one of the rows. If you have a hard time remembering, is it the top or the bottom? You are always going to, in this class, be using whole degrees of freedom. This one is almost always going to be some kind of decimal. So we will be using this t-value, this degree of freedom, and this significance, this top significance. Of all of the values in this table, you only need to know this t, this df, and this significance. Now, as I said before, this t value is what you would get if you ran this by hand. These degrees of freedom are what you would get if you calculated degrees of freedom by hand. The one thing that we haven't done and we will not do is calculate significance by hand. Now, for those of you who have already watched the t-test lecture, you'll have a little bit better, or the chi-square one, a little bit better understanding of statistical significance. But in general, we say that there is a significant difference between our two groups if this significance value is less than 0.05. As you can tell, 0.000 is indeed less than 0.05. So that would indicate to us that there is a significant difference between males and females in happiness. And we can even check to see which group is happier, which one is higher than the other in our t-test. Because we know if this is significant, that it means that there's a significant difference. Well, what is the significant difference? In the case of t-test, it's looking at group means. So we can come back and look at our group means, and we now know that based on our statistics, our t-test, that females are significantly happier than males in this sample of 1,600 plus students at the university. Now, one thing to remember here is the significance. It's if this value is less than 0.05. Less than. You need to write that down. You need to know that. This is going to come up in correlation and regression. And everything that we do in SPSS, we're going to be looking at significance. So you need to know how to interpret that. Less than 0.05, significant. Greater than 0.05, non-significant. Okay, so if you are wanting to know how to write up a sentence in APA style, well, I provide in the PowerPoint for you a convenient little way of how to write it up and another explanation of what it is. Here's your write-up and more information about it. So please check this out to see what it is. And notice the number of people in the analyses are going to be a little bit different than what we've got going on here sometimes. So the numbers might not be exactly the same. That's okay. It's the form you need and the style that is important. Now, when you are running t-tests, let's say you want to compare means for more than one mean. Well, we can put how much you like the university in here as well. Hit OK. And we get, I'm sorry, I hit the wrong thing. If we want to compare means, we do independent samples t-test. You can put how much you like the university there. Hit OK, just as before. We still get two tables. It's broken up by male and female. And here is our t-test. Again, we look at the top row. This is the same as before. Then we can also look at this one. Well, we have our t-value 7.5, same as we would get by hand, degrees of freedom. And we have our significance. Significance less than 0.05. That means there is a significant difference between our groups. We can go up and look at our means. Well, females' mean is 4.15. Males is 3.68. Therefore, females like the university significantly more than males. Anytime you run t-tests, independent samples t-tests, you're going to get these two tables. All right, so that about does it for t-tests. Most important thing for you to remember, just kind of memorize, is going to be this significance. It's important for you to know that and listen to some of the lectures coming ahead to really get into a better understanding of what that means, where it comes from in theory. Otherwise, at this point in time, you should be able to do everything from the previous lectures, descriptive statistics, split the files, be able to run t-tests, be able to understand what it is given you. You should be able to write up a sentence in APA style once you look through the example that I gave you. And if you are able to do that, you'll be in pretty good shape to take on the assignment, which will be coming up next. So please continue on Canvas. Check out the assignment.